time, which is still undefined. I was the superintendent here for almost 5 years and left in 2009. So it's now 2020, so it's over a decade since I've been here. So I hope I get a chance to meet all of you personally, but given social distancing, I don't know how likely that is. But I'm pleased to be here and joining Claire in helping to present this first look at the budget. So Claire, it's all yours.
Okay, let me tell Brian that we're ready to go. Brian, the tech guy. Okay, perfect. He says we're on. So I want to introduce myself. Although I do know a lot of the individuals that are on here, and I want to start off by thanking you for participating this evening. I'm Claire Searmans. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for the district, and this is my 11th budget. So I'm very excited, and like I said, in all that time, I do not believe that I've had a workshop where we have over 30 participants now, and people are still joining, so I'm going to admit them. I want to start off by also thanking NEA, Margot Rivera and her group. She sent me a list of individuals that are able to get on this evening, so thank you guys for joining us as well. Obviously, this is very unique and unusual way for us to all be meeting. So I want to start off by thanking all of you. Most of you guys are given to me. Let's see. Let me see if I can mute everybody. Okay. Most of you were given me, your names were given to me by your principals, and that means for the most part that you're probably very, very active at your school sites and in the parent-teacher organization at your school. So your role in our district is absolutely vital and very, very important. Appreciate it so much, and as you probably know, you are one of few people that step up and do all the hard work for all of our schools and all of our students. So much thanks and appreciation. I have a presentation that you guys were sent this evening. The presentation will actually show online. So I did want to mention that if you are viewing online, probably the second slide has some contact information for myself, Sandy Tracek, who is the Director of Finance, and Carlos Castillo, who is our payroll supervisor. Our contact information is on that slide. And if you have any questions that you want to email this evening and you want us to try to answer, then email Carlos, and then he can kind of report if he's getting any questions, because it's really hard for me to present, keep up with my presentation, and then also answer my emails. So just otherwise, the people who are participating in the Zoom, you can unmute your mic and ask me a question, and then definitely when we get to the end of the presentation, there'll be opportunity for you to ask questions. Does that sound good? Yep, good. Okay. I'm also not going to be able to see the slides as on the online presentation that they're viewing. So you guys will have to kind of keep up with me, and we numbered the slides on the bottom, and that's how we'll kind of keep track. So I thought I would talk a little bit about Wilson Schools. You guys are probably all real familiar with us because you're active and an active participant, and your child more than likely goes to our schools. But just some statistic information that a lot of people don't always know. We have 8,500 students, pre-K through 12, here in Wilson Schools. We employ over 1,600 employees. That includes subs, and seasonal employees that we only pay occasionally. Our operational budget for this 19-20 school year is $78 million. And our annual total operating budget includes all of our capital funds and federal funds is right at about $130 million. So we're quite a big organization here in Valencia County. The business office credentials, I just thought it probably would be important for people to kind of know that myself, I've been here for 23 years with the Wilson Schools. Sandy and Carlos have also been here a good portion of their careers, and we all have our New Mexico level 2 business official license. Carlos has his level 1, but we are actively trying to get him to his level 2 state license. In addition to these individuals, and Carlos and Sandy are both my right and left hand, they help me tremendously with the budget. Matter of fact, we all have our individual, I'm going to call it specialties with the budget, and they are extremely knowledgeable and capable and very helpful to me and to the district. So I like to tease that a lot of times people don't know who we are, and that's mostly because we're behind our computers. And we don't get out that often, but I want to thank them. The business also has a director of purchasing, a buyer, 3 payroll specialists, 2 accounts payable specialists, 2 senior financial specialists, and 2 financial specialists. So there's 14 employees in the business office. This presentation was prepared for the Board of Education, and we went through this last Tuesday with the board members and the new board members. And so some of the information that I put in here is just informational, and also might be helpful to you in the event that you want to know more about how we do things and why we do things. So the slide on the manual of procedures, PSAB Supplement 1. So this is, we have to adhere to the Public Education Department. They actually put out a manual that has a lot of instructions and information as to why we have to do the things that we do. The Supplement 1 is the very first book within that manual, and it's called Budget Planning, Preparation, and Maintenance. So there are actually 2 supplements that I'll refer to in this presentation. And if you want to see them in their entirety, then you'll have to go to the Public Education's website, and I can give you that address later on in the presentation. Or you can also email me or Carlos or Sandy and let us know, and we can send you a copy, electronic copy of the manual Supplement 1 or Supplement 3. So the Supplement 1 just talks about the budget planning, preparation, and maintenance. It gives a lot of information as to why we do the things we do. And the very first part of this talks about the purpose of the school's operating budget. And it is to provide a statement expressed in financial terms that serve as the primary tool for planning and controlling operations. So that is the number 1 goal of the budget, is for us to use as a roadmap to help support the schools in their 90-day plans, to provide historical data, and also to comply with all the state requirements. That's basically it in a nutshell. Our budget can, once it's approved, then it can also be increased, decreased, change. We can make changes to line items during the course of the year, and all those changes have to go through the school board for approval. Is there any questions on that? This next slide just has the copy of the Supplement 1 and Supplement 3. And again, like I said, this original presentation was prepared for the Board of Education. They were actually given copies of the supplements. That way they could review them and be able to ask questions at that particular time. So again, I'll reference these, and if you'd like more information about them, then contact our office and we will make sure that you can get copies of that. Otherwise, when you print out the entire manual of procedures, it's like, you know, a 5-inch binder, 2 5-inch binders actually of requirements and regulations that we have to follow. For the purpose of this presentation, also, we are going to focus on the operational budget. And the operational budget, the definition of the general fund is a chief operating fund of the school district and charter school that is used to account for all financial resources of the school district or charter school, except for those required to be accounted for in another fund. And a lot of times the state will talk about the general fund, and that usually includes operational, teacherage, transportation, and instructional materials. Those 4 funds make up the general fund in terms of, a lot of times in terms of when the state's talking about the general fund. But for the purposes of this presentation, we'll just talk about the operational fund. And the operational fund is our main source of revenue here in the district, and that's also the fund that's used to pay the majority of the salaries and benefits for all of our employees, in addition to utilities and supplies and books and items that support our clubs and our athletic groups. The budget timeline is, information is provided. We have already gone through a couple of these work sessions. Tonight we're here on the budget presentation for parent advisory, NEA, and community. Part of the reason why we're having this Zoom, and like I said, it's kind of silly, but it's exciting because other than the year where we were when we had to cut lots of positions, and then the very next year we closed Daniel Fernandez Elementary School. And both of those particular years, the boardroom was packed, wall-to-wall people, obviously, because we were making some major cuts, and people were getting reassigned and a whole lot of other stuff. But other than that, typically we usually just have a handful or so, maybe a dozen people that participate in our budget meetings. So this is kind of, it's unusual. It's definitely crazy times, but I'm very happy to see that we have a lot of participation, and hopefully I actually love telling people what I do and how I support kids learning, even though I'm not, a classroom teacher and I don't get to stand up in front of the kids. And especially now with us having to, kind of teach our kids from homes, I'm really hoping there's a whole deeper appreciation for teachers in the public school district, because even me, I consider myself an educator, even though I'm not a teacher. I struggle helping my kids do their assignments these days online. So hopefully there'll be some good that comes from this strange time that we're in. Last week on April 9th and 10th, we had a virtual spring budget workshop, and the significance of the spring budget workshop, it's actually put on by the public education department, and that's where they typically go through a lot of different sessions telling us about our budget and some of the requirements for our budget. Maybe there'll be some capital outlay and a lot of the different programmatic needs of the individual departments with IDEA B funding and Title I funding. This year that event took place last Thursday and Friday. There was actually only, I believe, eight or nine webinars that we attended. And so it was different. They did give us the new unit value, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But other than that, it wasn't quite the same as, attending a big conference and going to all the workshops. But, again, this is strange times, and we're all dealing with this as best we can. Just to kind of just talk real quick about the budget timeline. The next presentation to the Board of Education will be on April 28th. That'll give us, and in the event we might have another work session in between there. If we do, that'll get published and posted. But since we didn't have any numbers to be able to give to the board last time we met last week, then there's probably going to be a request to have an additional work session to the board prior to April 28th, when we have the final board input work session. May 12th is when we have the meeting scheduled for the budget approval, and then May 19th is when our budget is due to the public education department. So as you can see, it's usually a very short timeline. We have to do a whole lot of work in a very short amount of time. This year, one of the nice things is we only had a 30-day legislative session, and although we haven't been given the numbers from the public education department, there weren't a whole lot of changes in the legislative session. So, we're able to kind of be flexible and adjust fairly quickly. Student enrollment data, I know it's probably hard. Hopefully the presentation was a little bit clearer when you're able to print it out and take a look at it. But this is a 10-year historical enrollment data of our student enrollment. And you can kind of see it go up and down, kind of peak and valley over the last 10 years, but relatively it stayed pretty stable. We haven't had huge amount of growth or a huge amount of decline. Of course, you know, our students are the one that feed into the amount of state equalization money that we receive from the state. So it's, you know, we definitely like to see our enrollment going up as opposed to going down. So this last year we were slightly down on all of our counts. The significance of the 40th day is that's typically when the state has us calculate growth money. And you have to grow by 1% in order to claim or get growth money for the district. And we haven't grown over 1% in many, many years. So that's what that significance of the 40th day is. 80th and 120th, they actually use those days as the average enrollment on those two particular days to fund our SEG for the following year. So that's why they call it prior year funding. We use the student enrollment from the current year to fund next year's operational budget. So we are always very in tune to the student count dates, and we try to make our best effort to get, you know, kids in school on that day, because kids actually have to be in their seats in order for us to get funding for them. Sources of revenue for the operational fund, and that fund is $11,000. This is a snapshot of last year's proposed, estimated and proposed revenues for the budget purpose. And again, this is just so that people could kind of get an idea and see we're already in the process this year of calculating our estimated and proposed revenues for next year, but I didn't have those numbers solidified yet, so we wanted to go ahead and just give you guys a snapshot of the types of revenues that we see in the operational fund. And if you go down the list, you could see that our significant amount of revenue is from SEG, and that stands for State Equalization Guarantee. So 99% of the Lucena Schools budget is from our SEG that we get from the state. Last year, that number was $72,531,493.89. So this year, that number should be slightly higher because we did receive an increase in the unit value, but there's also some legislative mandates that we'll have to make sure that we're able to afford. Everything else is fairly, you know, budgeted conservatively, and you know, it's usually not significant to the operational budget. Probably the next significant amount is when we receive indirect costs from our federal grants and money that we receive from our taxes in the operational fund. So other than that, we don't have a whole lot of additional revenues in operational to support our budget.
Claire, can I pause you real quick?
Yes.
I guess Nora got kicked out and she's trying to get back in. Can you let her back in?
I will let Nora back in. Okay, we're good? The next slide talks about the Lucena School State Equalization Guarantee. So SEG, you'll hear that acronym a lot when we're talking about the operational fund. This just talks about the state equalization trend over the last couple of years, and you can see again, and basically because it's directly tied to our enrollment, it's relatively stable. It kind of goes across up and down slightly, and then last year is when we saw a significant increase, and the reason for the significant increase last year was due to K-5 plus and extended learning time being added into the operational fund. So prior to last year, any of the programs that used to actually be K3 plus were a separate funding that we reported. We have an application process, and it was a separate fund that the money was put into. And last year they put that into the operational fund in addition to instructional materials. And then we also had extended learning time. So the extended learning time is what increased our calendar, our student calendar and our certified staff calendars by, I believe it was 8 additional days last year. And so that is the reason why we had an increase in revenue last year, is for those two programs. We always talk about, on the next slide, we always talk about the training and experience index trend. And the reason that we talk about it is because it's a significant part of our operational budget. So once we get, the document is called a 910B5. It actually is a spreadsheet that, we actually take the number of students and then they put them into a formula depending on what grade level. And then you also have factors that include special ed and elementary PE, elementary music. You know, there's a whole lot of different things that affect the operational fund. And the training and experience is an index in that fund that's a multiplier. So we obviously want that number to be as high as possible. That gives us additional revenue. And we track it. And the significance of it, this is obviously all the way back to 2008 and 2009. You were probably here, Mr. Gibson.
I was.
Yeah, but you can kind of see how it's gone up and down, and the reason why we always want that number up is, again, like I said, it's a multiplier in our funding formula, so it gives us additional revenue. And some of the works that we have in place in order to keep that number up is the course reimbursement that we offer for staff members. We've increased the amount that we reimburse staff members to $250 up to 6 credit hours per semester. And we do that in an attempt to try to keep people going back to school and getting some additional degrees and years of experience. And that directly affects our certified staff. And last year they started a new teacher cost index, and so they're phasing out the training and experience index, and this year we're going to have a 50-50 split on our training and experience index and our teacher cost index. And right now that is slightly down from the 2018-19 level. And part of the reason why that number goes down is as we have retirements from teachers who have a lot of years of experience and in a lot of education, then we're replacing them with alternative licensed teachers and new teachers, and that always affects that, makes that number go down. So we continue to try to do our best to support people in continuing their education, and the reason why is it directly affects our operational budget. This looks like a big blob, the operational fund expenditure slide, and I apologize for that. Every time I try to change that color scheme, it kind of messed with the whole presentation. So, I left kind of the orangish color on there, but I did add some numbers off to the right-hand side, so you can kind of take a look at the way our operational fund expenditures break out. And then on the little index next to it, you have 1,000 who's operational, 2,100 student support services, 20. So all the different, those are all functions, and we have to report our budget to the function, to the object, and then down to the program level. So we do that, and this is kind of what it looks like when we just take a snapshot of the different functions. The 1,000 function is directly related to the students, and so that a lot of times includes all the teacher salaries and benefits, assistants, and the majority of the staff actually is in that 1,000 function, and that's why you can see that number is so large, $43 million. That goes directly to the students. And then, you kind of, by the description, you can kind of tell what some of these other costs are associated with. Student support services, that could be like your nurses and your library assistants, instructional supports, your counselors, and school admin support services, that's central office. School admin is your school administrators and charges associated with them. Central services are going to be your personnel department, your business office, and technology. Maintenance is maintenance, custodial, and all of our utilities. Property liability insurance is also under the 2,600. Student transportation. Our district has supported our transportation budget probably over the last 10 years, and so we are always putting some money into our transportation department to help support that program. 2,900 services, other support services. Those are our emergency reserves that we want to make sure we have in place. So in case we have a rainy day or the state cuts our budget, especially in the middle of the year, then we have a little wherewithal to be able to look before we have to cut staff or any other major cuts. Food service and capital outlay, those are pretty small, insignificant amounts in our operational budget, but our total operating budget for last year was $78 million. And so that's how it's broken out by function. This is how you see it on the chart. So the majority of the operational budget goes directly to support the students. This next slide just talks about the overall annual budget for Los Lunas schools. Our fiscal years start July 1 and end on June 30th. So every July 1 we have a brand new budget, and all the amounts that you see on here represent not only operational, but our student nutrition, our activity funds, transportation, capital outlay, federal programs, debt service funds, so all of the funds that we're responsible for. And when I talk about funds, just so that you guys kind of understand, we do fund accounting at the school district. We have to keep track of all the funds separately, and every fund has its own set of rules and regulations as to what we can spend on. So a lot of times, when we're looking at the total budget, we say, well, you have a lot of money in the bond fund, for example. Well, we have a lot of money in the bond fund, but that's a fund we're not allowed to spend salaries and benefits out of. So it's real specific to redoing construction projects and renovations. The bond project is also the money that we use to build the Performing Arts Center at Valencia High. So those types of capital outlay expenditures, they can't be utilized or mixed with operational funds. All the funds have to be kept separate. Our transportation fund, that's our to and from funding for buses to take kids to school or bring them to school, take them back home. That obviously can't be used to pay utility bills and those types of stuff. So all of the funds are kept separate. They all have their own little rules and regulations that we have to live within. And that's a lot of times why we can't mix all those pots of money together. They have to be accounted for separately. But this gives you a picture of the annual budget that Los Lunas Schools has been approved every July 1 of each fiscal year. Last year, you kind of see a huge jump from the year before, and that is directly related to capital outlay and also to the SEG state equalization guarantee going up for ELT and K5+. So those were the increases into those budgets, and that's the reason for the increase in last year. Other than that, it hovers right around $100 to $110 million. Some of the initial budget information that we had prior to last week was that during the legislative session, there was language in House Bill 5 that increased pay by an average of 4%. So right now we're working within that legislation to be able to provide a 4% raise for all of our employees. The average languaging gives us just a little bit of flexibility because we do have certain individuals on salary schedules that are in situations where they may not exactly get 4%, that they may get a little bit less, somebody else may get a little bit more, but overall we have to provide 4% for increase in salary over this year for our employees. Insurance rates continue to go up. They have gone up every year that I can remember. And right now for our employees who carry the medical benefit, if you have a high option plan, then you're going to see a 8.7% increase in our medical benefit premium that we have to pay. There are no liability increases and no dental premium increases for this next year. So that's good news. Utilities, I don't have any additional information for, but we do, track and make sure we keep track of our utilities on a monthly basis. And the salary estimated average of 85% of our budget. So that means 85% of our operational budget goes into salary and benefits for our employees. That's pretty typical for school districts across the state. Some are a little bit higher, some are a little bit less, but we seem to be fairly consistent with about 85% of our budget going to salary and benefits. Last Thursday at the virtual spring budget workshop, they did set the new unit value for the 2020-21 school year, and that is up $155.83. It's a 3.39% increase over the current year's unit value. And that number, the unit value and the significance, I'll tell you in just a second. The unit value is $4,758.10. The unit value, when you see our funding formula, it makes a little bit more sense because it actually takes the number of students. I like to call it like a little factory. We pour the kids in to the state equalization guarantee, and when they come out, MEMS, which then keeps track of them by the grade that they're in, and then, like I said, there's other adjustments to the state equalization guarantee, like special ed units, PE units, music. You also get to take into consideration training and experience, and then when it's all said and done, we get a total number of membership, and then we multiply the membership by the unit value, and that's how we get our state equalization guarantee number. So right now we do not have our 910B5, the funding formula worksheet. The state has said that they were going to start rolling those out based on when budgets are due, because there's some districts who have budgets due later this week and early next week. Those districts, they were going to work on their funding formula first, and then and that's the way they were going to roll that information out. So I'm hoping probably by the end of this week or early next week we have some more information and some dollars that we're going to work within for our budget to make sure that we can cover the average 4% raise, the medical premium increases, and really for the most part keep everything else is neutral or standard as we possibly can, and not have to make any significant cuts. The last board vision goals, that was the board's opportunity to have discussion and questions on the budget. So really that concludes the prepared presentation that I had this evening, and I know we covered a lot of numbers and talked about a lot of stuff. So gonna check with Carlos now and see if there were any questions that came in.
We had one question, and it said, we were wondering about the possibility of impact COVID on our budget, especially talking about like gas and oil prices going down.
So I'll be able to answer that. Given last week we had, like I said, several budget presentations from the public education department, and something that they have asked us to do is be cautious, be conservative. They are expecting to have a special session, and that date has not been set yet. So they want to make sure that, now is not the time when you're initiating any new programs, hiring a bunch of positions new to the district. Those types of conversations definitely took place, because I think at this particular time it's very unknown how exactly this is going to affect us. The gas and oil prices, that's very concerning for, I'm assuming, a lot of the legislators that are going to have to go back into special session and have that discussion. So like I said, as best as possible, the plan for our budget is going to maintain consistency as much as possible, adhere to the average 4% increase for our employees, and everything else will be try to hold as tight as possible so that there's not any major changes that we're having to deal with. I'm sure that probably didn't exactly answer the question, because I don't have that answer as far as exactly what's going to happen in the special session, what's going to happen next fiscal year, but that's what we were told to do, is budget conservatively as possible. Mr. Gibson, did you want to add to any?
No, I would just add one point. I was here for a long time. I'm very familiar with school budgeting. This district is in very good fiscal position. So if there are major cuts from the state level to the funding formula, I think Los Lunas will be able to weather it better than many districts. So Claire has done a really good job of shepherding our money, making sure that there's enough money in reserve to handle any occurrences, well, maybe not any, but major occurrences that could affect the district's budget. So the district's in good financial position.
Is there any other questions, Carlos, that came through?
Nothing on the chat or email, so.
I think I got one here on the chat.
I did not receive any. None for me.
Okay, I did get a question, and it's asking how much of the 8.2% medical increase is being covered by the district. So the NIMSIA, who's our insurance carrier, actually has a breakdown of how much the district pays per employee, and that's depending on their salary. There's a couple of breaks prior to, I believe it's 25,000, and then after that, it's the district covers 60% and the employee covers 40%. So when we add the increase of the medical deductible, then that gets split proportionately by the district and the employee, depending on where they fall within that matrix. And as soon as I have that, Margot, because the NIMSIA group did not present last week at the virtual spring budget workshop, they actually had sent an email out with the percentage increases, and then they said they're going to be sending us a binder with the information. So as soon as I get that, then we will make sure and get that in your hands as well. Something else that I wanted to say, I had forgotten earlier in one of the conversations is, you know, I think a lot of times when I talk to people and they have questions about the budget, a lot of people want to know, well, you know, how do we get new playground equipment for our school site? How do we get classrooms with paint or carpet or, you know, some different things like that. A lot of those are capital outlay funds, and a lot of those should go through your principal. Those requests should go through your principal. And then your principal filters that information to the finance office so that we can prioritize for those type of expenditures. So everybody should have the opportunity to, you know, relay that information. But a lot of times when I get questions, those are some of the questions that I get. They're usually not related to the operational budget. They're related to some of the capital outlay funding that we receive in order to fix things and make our schools look better. But if you guys have those types of questions as well, then we work with your principals, your site administrators in order to do the best we can to get those items fixed. Any other questions? And you guys who are on the Zoom have the opportunity to just unmute yourself and ask a question if you so choose. And if not, or hearing none, I guess I should say then, I'm assuming that you at least, you know, got a good understanding of it.
Claire?
Yes.
Since we don't have any subs, I mean, it's almost going, well, it's going to be over 8 weeks that there's no subs being paid or anything like that. Does that put us in a better position in that section of the budget? Or is that going to transfer to next year?
So anything that we don't spend in operational does get to roll over into next year. And it becomes part of the cash balance that we will use for budgeting purposes, and then we'll go into next year. So yes, in that particular line where we had planned to spend subs between the end of the year, then we should see an increase in the amount of funding that we're able to carry forward. Yes.
Claire, there's another question. It says, hello, can you explain how decision is made on how much money is allocated to each school site?
So we work with the student enrollment numbers, just like presented earlier. We have our 40th, 80th, and 120th day, and we'll utilize the average for the school. Depending on the amount of money that gets budgeted, I'm just going to use like supplies and materials, for example. We'll put an amount of budget in for supplies and materials, and then based on the number of students at your particular site, then that $100,000, if it's $100,000 that's for supplies and materials, that gets broken out by site depending on enrollment. And then that money is given to the principals or communicated to the principals, and then they come up with the plan as to how they allocate that out, either to the individual departments at the secondary level or to the individual classrooms at the elementary level. But that it's based on space, your budgets are based on the number of students, and the amount that we budget is fairly consistent with what we do on a yearly basis. We try to keep that fairly consistent. Hope that answered that question. Sandy and Carlos, you're welcome to comment and add in. I know Sandy in the office is the one who breaks out the allocations for the school sites. Did you want to add anything, Sandy?
No, I mean, that's, I've already kind of looked at the enrollment numbers and put those in there. It just depends on when we find out how much money we're going to receive as to how much money we're in a budget for supplies. So, but they all of them are based off the same amount as far as the number of students.
Claire, I know we're almost closing up, but it looks like Nora got kicked out again.
I'm not seeing her, but Margot, maybe we can make sure that yeah, if Nora had any questions or anything like that, then we'll get those, and we'll get an answer to you.
Claire, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The money that's set aside for specifically for safety and security, is that part of the operational budget, or is that a completely different account, considering it's a bond?
Yeah, so it's separate from the operational money. It's one of our capital outlay funds, and we have several projects in the works right now. We had applied from a grant from the state in order to get some security systems, fencing, new radios, those types of equipment to the school sites, and we're in the process right now of getting price information. The Board of Education actually approved several of our requests last month for some security projects, cameras and new systems for several of our elementaries. I believe Tomei is one of those ones that was in the first phase of funding, so we're working on that right now. That's a separate pot of money than the state equalization guarantee, and we have capital money already earmarked for those programs. Any other questions? No, Carlos is saying no. Okay, well, again, you have our email addresses, our phone number, how to get a hold of us. If you have any questions that you think of after the fact, then send us an email and we will be happy to get an answer to you. Again, I appreciate your participation. I appreciate what you do for the school sites with the parent-teacher organization. So thank you very much for taking the time this evening, and we'll be seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Claire.
Bye.
Have a good one.